The Global Carbon Budget. The Global Carbon Project (GCP) is a group of scientists who study and track carbon dioxide (CO2) emissions around the world. They gather and analyze data so everyone can understand how emissions are changing each year. Their work is very important for understanding climate change, even though it sometimes goes unnoticed. Highlights from 2025's carbon emissions are: there are two main types of emissions. CO2 emissions come mainly from fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, and cement production, and land use changes like deforestation and wildfires. In 2025, fossil fuel emissions increased by about 1%. Land use change emissions decreased. Even though land use change emissions fell, fossil emissions rose enough that total global emissions stayed almost the same as last year, around 42 billion tons. Fossil fuel emissions still rising. Fossil fuel emissions are still going up, not down, as they should if we want to fight climate change. Coal and cement emissions rose only slightly, less than 1%. Major regions, what's happening in each? China's emissions are expected to rise by just 0.4%, which could mean its emissions may soon stop growing completely. The change is mainly because China built lots of solar and wind power, so almost no extra coal was needed. Experts think China's emissions will stop increasing between 2026 and 2030. The US and EU are expected to see a small emissions increase this year, breaking their longer trend of falling emissions. In the US, more gas exports made gas expensive, so coal became more attractive for energy, especially during cold weather. The EU used more natural gas because wind and hydropower were weaker than expected. These changes may turn out to be temporary. India's emissions will grow, but less than last year. Early rains reduced the need for cooling, and renewable energy grew quickly, keeping coal use low. Japan's emissions fell by around 2% because it restarted some nuclear power plants and added more solar energy, replacing coal. Land use change, some good news. Land use change emissions dropped. Why? There were fewer big wildfires, and countries like Brazil cut back on deforestation. Tracking land use emissions is hard, but the data this year seems positive. The global carbon budget. Can we meet targets? The world wants to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, but with current emissions, it's almost impossible. At the current rate, 42 billion tons per year, we only have about 4 years left before the budget to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius runs out. If we worked really hard, we might slow the rise enough to stretch that to 5 years, but it would mean cutting global emissions by 20% right away, which is very difficult. Staying under 2 degrees Celsius is still possible, but only with much stronger actions. Even if the world misses the target by a little, every reduction in emissions means less damage from climate change. Thank you for listening to this Geography Expert podcast. You can find further resources and information at the Geography Expert Substack and my website www.richiecunningham.com.